Yeah, no, that's fine. But that.
This is Jennifer. Can you hear me?
One second. We can hear you, Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Can we hear? Yep. Oh, there you go. There we go. It's like I can't hear it quite. In the unlikely event there is an emergency, there are stairwells to my right and to my left. Please take the stairs down and meet at the Orpheum at 2nd and Adams. Also, there are 2 fire extinguishers in the rear, to my left and to my right. AED machine, AED machine out to my left, your right, out here through the lounge. The kitchen, who is a CPR AED certified? Raise your hand, please. Several, perfect. I need a primary and a secondary to notify 911. Primary first. Primary, there's our 911 right there. And secondary, thank you. Blind.
Yeah, I'm flying blind, so
Which is scary, but go
this will
ahead.
be shocking in and of itself. Anyway, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are going to take our meetings out of order this morning in order to accommodate some scheduling conflicts. So we are going to actually start with the Valley Metro Rail meeting, and then we're going to switch into the study session. So for those of us that are not on Valley Metro Rail, we'll enjoy lunch. For the rest of you that have to work, meeting's yours.
Thank you, Chairman Stitt, for making this accommodation. I'm convening the meeting and welcoming members to the February meeting. Pat, can you do the roll call?
Morning. Good morning, everyone. Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Heredia? Vice Mayor Adams? She is online.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Councilmember Pastor
Here.
and Vice Mayor Harris. We have a quorum, Chair. You can proceed.
Thank you. Item number 1 is the minutes from January 18th to 2024 board meeting are presented for approval. I am requesting a motion. I have a motion and a second. Second. All those in favor, say aye. Those, any nays? Motion carries. Carries? Yeah. Item 2, Capital Light Rail Extension Design Contract Award. Jessica Mefford Miller will present. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I'd like to invite Trevor Collin, our Chief of Capital Development, to the podium to provide a brief overview of the proposed design contract award for design on the Capital Extension Light Rail Corridor. Mr. Collin.
Thank you, Jessica. Chair Pastor, members of the board. This is the design contract for the capital extension. The project will begin in the downtown hub where we're currently doing work right now. And it will extend light rail to 15th Avenue, both along Jefferson and Washington. It is a shortened alignment from what was originally planned, but will still serve the Capitol complex and will be a really good project. This is for the design contract to Jacobs Engineering. And we're looking to start and advance the design effort as soon as the contract's awarded.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What design was chosen?
Which design? The 15th Avenue Loop, Chair. 15th Avenue Loop, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I need a motion of staff recommends the Board of Directors authorize the CEO to award a contract for the Capital Light Rail Extension Project Design Services with Jacobs Engineering Group, Inc. for an amount not to exceed 18.7 million. Do I have a motion? I have a motion on item 2. Is there a second? I will second the motion. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Ayes carried. Item number 3, report on current events and suggested future agenda items. Anybody? All right. Item 4, next meeting. The next RMC meeting is Thursday, March 21st, 2024 at 11:15 a.m. Thank you for joining. One of my fastest meetings.
Great.
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned. We will start the study session in approximately 5 minutes. It is posted for 11:30. Thank you. We will stay on this feed for the entire study session and the following 2 board meetings.
Since they didn't entrust me with a gavel, with a glass top table, we are going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We are going to start with the joint study session of Valley Metro RPTA and Valley Metro Rail. And this meeting, we're just going to turn right over to our CEO, Jessica Mefford Miller, and she'll take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Before we begin the fleet strategy study session, I want to start with a brief mission moment. We would like to recognize our Allied Universal Security team member, Kiara Hamilton, who is right here with our Allied Universal leadership. Ms. Hamilton joined the Allied Universal Security contract in December of 2023. And last month, I think she had a mission moment where she was in support and service to our community. On January 13th, Ms. Hamilton was patrolling at 19th and Dunlap, and she recognized an adolescent male who appeared to be in distress. He was cold, he was tired, he was hungry, and it was getting very late. Ms. Hamilton approached him, earned his confidence and trust, and stayed well after her shift had ended until law enforcement could arrive and support this young man who was indeed a runaway and in need of some help. So we want to thank Ms. Hamilton for her service. This is what we do. We connect communities and enhance lives, but we do so by serving people. Ms. Hamilton, thank you. And if you don't mind, I'm going to switch sides of the room so I can be with our team here. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this study session. This study session comes out of a board request for a preview of bus fleet electrification or zero emissions bus fleet. We're adding a little bit of, I think, necessary table setting to the conversation. To my knowledge, we have not had a discussion with the board about fleet strategy. And later in this meeting this morning, we'll be asking the board to authorize spending on a bus purchase. This is actually the first bus purchase since I've joined the organization. We have taken time to build the team and establish a now strong program for fleet replacement strategy. So we'd like to walk through that with you. Before I begin, I do want to have team members quickly introduce themselves. I'll start on screen with our partner at WSP, Chantel Dreamer. Chantel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, happy to. Hello, I'm Chantel Dreamer. I'm an Assistant Vice President of Zero Emission Transitions at WSP, and I have been working with the Valley Metro team for, the past year and a half on the Zero Emission Transition Plan. So we've worked really intimately on a really thoughtful, thorough, data-based approach that the team will be presenting to you today. So I'll be here to answer any questions and all questions that might come up. Great to meet you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ken Kessler, Chief Financial Officer with Valley Metro. I'll be participating in this study session this morning.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Gabe Lopez. I'm the bus maintenance manager.
I guess it is good afternoon, so I'll go ahead and roll with that. Chair, members, my name is Darren Curry, and I'm the Chief Maintenance Officer of Valley Metro.
Good morning, good afternoon, good midday. I'm Carol Ketcherside. I'm the Deputy Director for Service Planning and Scheduling here at Valley Metro.
Thank you, team. So here's what we're going to walk through today. We're going to do some table setting. I think it's helpful to give you a quick snapshot of our current fleet. Today, we are going to focus on our bus fleet, though we have many other vehicle types. We'll introduce you to a purchasing strategy that we'll adopt moving forward so that we can reduce the strain on our capital program and evenly distribute our operating resources, including our maintenance work over time. Ken will walk you through how we fund buses now, how we've been funding buses lately with the assistance of a relatively new program, Lower No Emissions, that comes out of the Federal Transit Administration. And I'd like to wrap by giving you a snapshot into national trends in bus manufacturing, because this is an important component of our fleet transition plan. Couple of reminders, I think, for us all. When we introduce fleet replacement strategy, we're typically looking out 20 plus years. In those out years, we've got a plan, but that plan does have to be written in pencil. We have to be adaptive and reflexive to changes in the vehicle performance, changes in our level of funding. So when we show you, here's what we're going to buy in 2045, know that we've got a plan we're working toward, but we might pivot from that. We're going to cover a number of topics related to fleet today, including our zero emissions transition plan. Know that these are conversations that we have and or will be having with member city staff. We've been engaging them of late in a discussion about fleet replacement strategy. This is a departure from past. Previously, our fleet replacement strategy was what I call replacing like for like. So if you've got a 40-foot CNG bus, we're just going to replace it with another 40-foot CNG bus when we retire that vehicle at approximately 12 years of life. Now we are looking at our passenger loads to help us determine what size vehicle we need. We're also looking at the available propulsion systems, whether that's compressed natural gas, liquid natural gas, diesel, fuel cell electric bus, battery electric bus, et cetera. We're also keeping a close eye on our funding streams, because we have what I call once in a generation opportunities right now to avail ourselves of funding available through the bipartisan infrastructure law to support some of the infrastructure and the vehicle purchases. So that's informing our fleet replacement strategy as well. And another thing that we look at is an equity analysis, so that we understand how we're distributing the benefits and then some of the negative externalities of vehicles across our system. And this becomes especially important when we begin to introduce zero tailpipe emissions buses. So there's a lot going on. We're going to give you a high level snapshot. We endeavor not to introduce too much jargon, but it's going to happen. Please interject and ask a question. If we throw an acronym up on the screen or say it and it doesn't make sense, we want to have a productive two-way conversation so that moving forward, we can make informed decisions together about the future of fleet and facilities. So now I'm going to turn it over to our maintenance team to introduce our existing fleet profile.
Again, good evening, morning, chair, members. While we are really going to focus on the bus, this represents currently our existing fleet. As you know, the Siemens cars are still coming in. All 11 have actually been certified on the first order. So we're in different phases. There's many more than 60 here on the property going through burn-in. The 6th Street cars, just real quick, we can have the 5. The 6th is we're working with a vendor to be able to get that one certified and get that closed out. Briefly, our paratransit, the breakup is the 79 and 25, and then our non-revenue fleet. As you can see, the heavy, that's really our high rail type gear, and the others. Just an important note, even though we're going to focus on bus, we will be presenting in the near future a fleet replacement strategy for the paratransit as well as the non-revenue fleet. That's, what does that mean? I don't even know how to operate this.
To the left, or to the right.
Here, you operate that. There we go. So this is a brief breakdown of the existing bus fleet profile. It shows the propulsion and or fuel source, our hybrids, then of course our MCIs, which are the express buses. We still have 7 remaining LNGs holding on. The bulk of our fleet obviously is our 40-foot fixed route. That's where that lies. And then we have the different circulators. Next one. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Gabe Lopez to go over really the reason why it's important to have a fleet strategy.
Thank you, Darren. So, Chair and members of the board, what we're looking at here is a strategy for balancing the purchasing of our procurement So we have a plan set in place to take us to the 2030. And one of the things we're focusing is getting an average age of 6 years old for our fleet, or 250K miles is our average miles. One of the things we want to improve is our fleet availability. We want to eliminate the need for deferred maintenance and better control overall capital cost. And you can see as our bulletins, there's one of the things we want to focus on.
Hold on a second. So with this, the reason why we're targeting the average 6 or 250, if you look at a complete life cycle of a typical 12-year bus, 6 years is the midway point. If we're managing our mileage correctly, utilization rather, then we should land somewhere around the 250 to 300,000 miles. That's where we set up the midlife overhaul. This is where the largest maintenance effort will occur. And so for us to bring in, and Gabe will show you on the next slide. Yeah, go ahead and go to it. If we target 1/12 of the fleet, it will balance us out to an average fleet age of 6 years or 250,000 miles. So that allows us to be very balanced, very predictable. It also balances out our manpower loads far as the facility. Even the facility themselves can only take so many vehicles at one time. So if you look to the left, I'm still in Gabe's thunder, so I'm already rolling. You can see our past history where we have made purchases and the sheer numbers that are there. So if you look to the right, you'll see by replacing 1/12 of the fleet, that'll bring us into eventually, if our fleet size stays current, which this is very fluid, it'll adjust as we expand. All of this will adjust. We'll balance out to a 25-year purchase. So back to what I was saying with that midlife 6-year, 250,000, that means once the purchases with the 20 buses, then 29, but more importantly, the 25, that really means that we would have to take out of our spare ratio 2 buses per month to be able to perform the midlife overhauls. Conversely, if you look at the 61 bus purchase, that's going to require 5. So that's 5 buses that come out of the spare every month during that, for the 12-month period. So that's why it's so important that if we balance out the original acquisition, in turn, it balances out our work loads at the facilities, but equally as important, fleet availability. So with the 61 bus purchase, that's how many buses are not available. If we balance it out to where we're at the 25, like I said, we're only taking 2 from the fleet. Now, we currently do have a little bit of an issue because where we made that big purchase in 2018, we are now developing the midlife overhaul. And we're looking over 39 buses that we need to try to squeeze into a 12-month period. So we're going to have to get creative here. So we'll hit the high points, right? We know we got to do the engines, we got to do the transmissions, we got to keep them reliable. But there's a lot of other things that we would like to do in the future where cosmetic and different things. So we're going to have to do some modified versions early on, but eventually we'll march along other than over the horizon. So right now you're only seeing 6 years, and we're currently working to get us out to 15 years because we really need to see what 2039 looks like. And I know that sounds like it's a far time off, but it's really not, because we're going to have to make decisions now to be able to balance out that fleet as we pass specifically 2033, because that 61 bus purchase, on how are we going to manage that? We already know that we can't take 5 buses out every month. So we're going to have to look at fleet utilization, adjusting the miles, moving buses from location to where we can achieve the desired miles. So we're really going to have to get creative to be able to balance it out. Now, the good news is it probably only takes 10 years. Jessica and I did it in our last position, and it took 20 years. So we cut the time in half. So I think we're doing pretty good. It's only 10. But what it does do is set us up great for the future because it becomes very easy to manage. So once we get through the hurdles here, it's really just monitoring it as service changes, we expand or whatever it is, it's all very manageable. So we're really setting us up in the future. Our city members and partners can see outside of inflation what we're going to be asking for off into the future. So there won't be big surprises of, oh, by the way, we're going to buy 61 buses and this is how much money we need. You're going to know. And so by balancing out the capital, again, it balances out the impact on the fleet availability. It also sets our contractors up for success. When you have large groups that are needing a tremendous amount of maintenance at one time, even the best contractor in the world is going to struggle. Even if they had the manpower, they couldn't physically take that many buses and put through maintenance. I know Jessica's looking at me and we got to go quick, so I'll end it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thanks, Darren. Chair, members of the board. I'm going to just quickly highlight our bus funding strategy. Currently, our bus funding is largely federal funds and Prop 400 public transportation funds as the local match. We typically fund at an 85% federal, 15% local match ratio. The federal formula money is programmed by MAG across the region for all FTA projects, including fleet. We do have a balance in Prop 400 at the end of the program of about $27 million to give us some flexibility as we look towards doing some of these different propulsion vehicles. So there is funding there available for match for the federal funds. And I do want to mention that as we transition into Prop 479, the basic funding strategy for buses will remain the same in that plan as well. The main difference we have going into Prop 479 is the concept of members' jurisdictional equity allocation goes away and programs will be funded programmatically instead of by a jurisdictional equity concept. So moving on to our federal funding outlook. Again, as I mentioned, we'll continue to utilize federal formula funds and regional funds into the future to fund our budget purchases. We'll also continue to pursue competitive grant funds. We've had some success here. In the last few years, we have received about $13.3 million in the low or no emissions program from FTA and federal fiscal year 23. Additionally, we have also received about $5 million in community project funding from Congress to help with our transition efforts as we move towards an electrification or an alternative propulsion fleet. So that's been good news. We'll continue. There's an opportunity here. We're going to partner with Phoenix and looking at potential other partners for the current low-no grant program. That application is due near the end of April, and we'll be working towards putting together an application with the city of Phoenix and, like I said, potentially some other partners to help make that application more competitive. And just a real quick look at the planned bus purchases in the Transit Lifecycle Program. Currently, this is numbers prior to the fleet transition plan moving towards electric buses. So this is what was programmed for current bus fleet. And as I mentioned, there's some dollars and flexibility in there to help us move towards the different propulsion systems that we're looking at, whether it be battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell, et cetera. And in the long-term MAG plan for Prop 479, there's ongoing funding in there for bus replacements through the end of that program as well. And with that, I will turn it back to Jessica.
Back to me. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Darren and Gabe. I'd like to give you an overview of our zero emissions fleet trend. Oops, sorry about that. Work we've done recently to evaluate possibilities for introducing zero emissions vehicles to our fleet. So when I say zero emissions, I'm specifically referring in this moment to battery electric buses and fuel cell electric buses. I always like to caveat that they are zero tailpipe emissions because it does not mean that there are no greenhouse gas emissions that go into producing the energy to power these buses. And I've got a little graph that I'll show you so that you can see the greenhouse gas emissions associated with these various technologies. So shortly after I arrived here at Valley Metro, we engaged with WSP, and that team is led by Chantal Dreamer, who's joining us today, to develop our fleet transition plan. We had, at that time, we had $10 million in congressionally directed funding. We're so fortunate to have received that award, but we really weren't ready to put those funds to work yet because we didn't have a plan. And you don't get these buses and plug them into the wall and hope for the best. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So the zero emissions effort, it's a living document, and I must emphasize that this is constantly in a state of draft. With our first deployment of zero emissions buses, we're going to learn a lot. Technology is going to progress every year, and we're going to go back and keep iterating that plan. But this is our roadmap to a zero fleet, toward a zero emissions fleet. This also has helped us already develop highly competitive applications. We had submitted several low or no emissions grant applications prior to our first successful application in 2023. We weren't going to win because we didn't have a plan. We've got a plan, and we won a $13.3 million award just last year. This also helps to educate and engage our staff and our member city staff so that we all have a common base of knowledge. And it integrates that zero emissions fleet transition plan with that overall bus fleet transition plan that Darren referenced earlier. Couple of caveats and important points I think it's important for us all to remember as we go down the zero emissions path. It's why, what is our why? Why are we doing this? So the impetus behind introducing zero emission, zero tailpipe emissions buses is to deliver environmentally sustainable, still productive and accessible and equitable public transportation. So this is where that environmental sustainability comes into play, but it also has to check those other boxes. We also must ever remember that the most environmentally sustainable thing that we can do in public transit is to shift people out of single occupancy vehicles onboard transit vehicles, whatever that propulsion system is. So we must never lose sight of effective service in the name of introducing zero emissions vehicles. I'll get off my soapbox now and we'll start talking technical. A key piece of our fleet transition plan began with what we call a fatal flaws analysis. So we're evaluating two different types of technologies, battery electric buses and fuel cell electric buses. And the performance of these buses actually depends a lot on your physical environment, your weather, and your climate, and something that we call block length. And all a block is, think of it as a bus's shift throughout the course of the day, because an operator might take a bus out of the garage in the morning, and then he or she might be relieved by another operator in the field. We keep those buses out as long as we can, because that's the most economically efficient way for us to relieve vehicles. So let's contrast, if I may call them BEB, battery electric buses, and FCEB, fuel cell electric buses. One of the challenges we know with battery electric buses is they have a lower range. So that means they can't go as far between charges as a fuel cell electric bus. That's important to note. And they're also more sensitive to climate. And you and I know it gets hot in Phoenix. So this is something we've been paying very close attention to. In some markets, although I am coming from a 19th century city, I am so delighted to be here in Phoenix, where we have a very strong and very reliable grid. So this is an area where we actually ranked pretty highly in terms of likelihood for success for BEBs. Our peers in California, you're familiar with rolling blackouts and strain on the grid there. Same thing happening in Texas. They don't have the reliable grid that we do, and so they might be choosing to make other choices. There's also limited market availability of battery electric buses. Same is true actually of fuel cell buses. But we are seeing progress. We've been experiencing, when I say we, I mean the industry, about a 5-year increase in battery range every single year. Now, fuel cell, there are some key benefits. Fuel cell does have a longer range. It's less sensitive to climate, also less sensitive to slope, which is important for some of our peers operating in more mountainous and hilly regions. There is a wide range of greenhouse gas emissions upstream for fuel cell. There is gray, there is blue, and there is green hydrogen, and their greenhouse gas emissions vary pretty wildly. I don't want to get too down into the weeds here, but our focus is on green hydrogen, because there is no point in paying more for a bus to fuel it with gray hydrogen, because then you're not achieving those greenhouse gas emission savings. There is also less market availability, and the fuel cell electric bus technology, it's a little less mature. Take a look at greenhouse gas emissions since I've been referencing them. So this is just, I think this is as tons or kilograms of CO2 emissions per mile of service moving from left to right. Is diesel and CNG. So this is what our fleet mix is today, is diesel and CNG, and that's kilograms per mile. And then we move into electricity, and the current just is based on how we here in the Phoenix region derive our electricity today. That future state, this actually comes from working closely with SRP during this process to understand how they're going to generate electricity. And then on the right, now we've got hydrogen, and I mentioned gray, blue, and green hydrogen. So you can see why I say there's really not much point in us pursuing gray hydrogen fueled vehicles. It would have to be blue or preferably green. It seems like an easy choice, but then when we look at supply and availability of green hydrogen on our market, that's a challenge, quite a challenge. So quickly, I want to just show you what block completion means. When we look at blocks, we're looking at the way our system is designed today. We don't want to split up blocks and have to bring a bus back to the garage midday to fuel and then bring it back out, because that's going to cost us money. Regardless of what bus you're running, your most expensive part of your operating cost is labor. So that's taking that operator out of service to our customers and bringing it back to charge. We're not going to do that. So my goal for us is to enter zero emissions buses at a point where we know we can complete at least 40% of our blocks with that zero emission bus. And for some of our long blocks that are out there a long time, for the time being, we're going to assign our diesel or our compressed natural gas buses to those blocks. So we have to be very deliberate in the assignment of vehicles by line. We already are. Yes, council member.
Thank you, John. Apparently my fingernails are too long. So is at this point, when you're considering the length of travel time for these vehicles, does that mean that you might possibly change the routes? That if you have something that goes less distance, then you would change route A to route B to route C to make up the difference, so that you wouldn't be, obviously coming and going is your biggest cost because you're not making any money on coming and going. But would that be, is that something that is in the consideration?
It's not. So we might make changes to the routes, but we want that to be based on our community and our customer needs, funding levels. We don't want to let our technology drive our service. Our service needs to drive the technology. And so that's why we did this blocking analysis. So we're confident at this moment that we could begin, and it's a piecemeal deployment. Our first deployment, we're planning 20 buses in total. We could begin introducing these buses to the fleet without having to change those blocks. And that's really important. We have seen some of our peer agencies, especially our early adopter peers, are kind of on that cutting edge or bleeding edge sometimes, I'm sure it feels like to them, actually have to change the service. We don't want to do that. Yeah. So just a little bit of a graph so you can see our technology forecast. This is something that we have been following for a very long time. Before my arrival here at Valley Metro, I've been working in this space for many years. And Darren and I actually launched one of the country's biggest initial battery electric deployments in 2019. My God, we planned that for over a decade. So we've been following this and we've been engaged. And as I mentioned earlier, we expect to see about a 5% increase in range year over year. This is quite an eye chart. I can't read it on the screen. I hope you can read it in front of you. But I want to give you just a couple of the highlights. It's not critical to synthesize this all at this moment. But we looked at funding. We looked at the cost of energy at our facilities, focusing at this time on Mesa Greenfield Bus Operations and Maintenance Facility and East Valley Bus Operations and Maintenance Facility in Tempe. Couple of things that we should note. Let's focus on cost per mile. This is how we measure how much it costs to deliver that service. So the operating expense for battery electric bus in Mesa is $1.72 a mile. And for fuel cell electric bus, it's $1.94 a mile. So pretty significant difference in cost. Also significant difference in cost of the vehicles themselves. Now they do have different life cycle costs, but I want you to remember this so that when we get a couple of slides ahead, it's important background. And then here's at East Valley Bus Operations and Maintenance Facility. It's a little bit lower. So the operating cost for battery electric is $1.57 compared to $1.72 at Mesa Greenfield and $1.87, a little bit closer operating costs on the fuel cell electric bus relative to Mesa Greenfield. So again, this includes an initial deployment where we would focus those zero emissions vehicles on the shorter blocks in the service area. So typically agencies are choosing, is it battery, is it fuel cell, or the third option is a mixed propulsion fleet. I mean, we have a mixed, yeah, please, Mr. Chair. Okay. We actually have a mixed propulsion fleet there and introduced. We've got diesel, we've got liquid natural gas, and mostly compressed natural gas. So another option for us is to pursue a mixed fleet where we would introduce both battery electric bus and fuel cell electric bus. Now, the biggest cost of adding that additional propulsion system is going to be your infrastructure. Our pursuit of zero emissions buses and associated infrastructure is predicated on the assumption that we would have the opportunity to avail ourselves of low or no emissions funding. These are competitive grant awards, as Ken mentioned. The funding for FY24 applications are due April 24th of this year is $150 billion.
1.5 billion.
1.5 billion nationwide, and that's low no emissions plus a program we call bus and bus facilities. So the plan would be to tap into that discretionary funding, which is on top of the formula funding that we're using to propel our bus purchases today. So if we can attract funding, we would have the opportunity to build the infrastructure, to have the electric feeds and the charging infrastructure at facilities. But then this also gives us a chance to explore hydrogen fuel cell, which, as I mentioned earlier, it's not as mature, but this is, I don't want to say it's new, because this is what's happening at most of our California properties, by the way. But there are some advantages. You're using different energy sources, so it's reducing strain on your electric grid. It's not all battery electric. It's introducing this other mix, so you're relying on hydrogen. It's also giving you different fleets with different reliability, and then the fuel cell has the go long range. So 99% of those bus blocks today could be supported by fuel cell electric bus. It's going to be a while before battery life is able to support our longest ranges. So the conversation we're having now is in that April 2024 application. Should we potentially pursue a mixed propulsion fleet? Now, I'll talk about that strategy moving forward, but I want to pause.
Mr. Chair, Jessica, a question for you. Oh. You good? Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, sorry, I was gonna let you go. And I don't know what slide this is, but the battery electric bus and the fuel cell electric bus, how are you working, or what is the plan to working with utility companies? Because the conversation I'm having now is that there's not enough of a grid to support what everybody is pushing. And they are having discussions as to what it needs to happen and how do they advance and move in order for that, for the future. However, there's not enough land. There's not enough workers currently to be able to move into that and move rapidly. And there's a lot of cost in doing the infrastructure, which means there has to be a dialogue of who's going to pay that for that cost. So that's one. I mean, I think this is great, a great plan, and those that worked on it, more thank you for doing it. But that's one of the questions. That's just a statement, I guess, and we can discuss later because I know we probably need to digest this and then go really into a bigger discussion another time. And then another slide said all blocks will be able to be electrified by 2041. How are you working with the cities to have that conversation to make sure all our cities are electrified, and who's paying for it? And how are we, I would say for the city of Phoenix, how would we integrate that to pay for it in our bond? Because all of this is costing money. And I know that Valley Metro doesn't have all those millions and millions of dollars to be able to do this. And I know it's in time, but we have to have these conversations up front with these cities before, because one of us may say we're not doing it. I mean, we will, but it'll take longer, not faster, it'll take longer to do it. And then infrastructure, because the city of Phoenix has had this dialogue regarding changing our fleet, and we voted to change our fleet and everything. What we are discovering and what we know is the infrastructure piece of where, at what point will the bus need to be charged, I guess. And we're not sure how it's going to hold up in our heat. So we are being cognizant of really purchasing not a lot to be able then to test it. But when it means infrastructure and you need to put, we're talking, where would they stop midway? We bring in a bus there and all the other dynamics that go along with it. Land is precious now. So if this is the long-term plan, what are we looking at right now in purchasing land? So those are all my questions. You don't have to answer them, but I think those are the things that as a team and as we move forward to discuss. So thank you.
I can give a brief response. So we engaged with SRP in the development of the fleet transition plan. So we are having conversations about available electric supply, and that's reflected in the transition plan. Second is the approach that we're proposing is slow and steady. It's very much an incremental approach. We would not receive a first delivery of 4 battery electric buses until 2027. And it increments a little bit at a time moving forward. In fact, today in the next meeting, we're going to be asking for approval to purchase 20 CNG buses because we're still CNG at this time. And while we think the technology will support even the longest of our blocks by 2041, that does not mean that we're proposing we have all zero emissions buses by 2041. That's not a direction that we would likely take. And there are a number of variables here. So if federal funding, if the bipartisan infrastructure bill, bipartisan infrastructure law level funding for zero emissions vehicles and infrastructure doesn't hold, that's going to change our plan moving forward, because our assumption is that 80% of the infrastructure in the buses that support zero emissions transition is paid for by discretionary funding, 20% by regional funding. So if that changes, we're not going to be as equipped to make that transition.
All right, Council. It's Councilmember, right?
That's actually my question is, what happens if that funding doesn't hold? What's next?
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Next. Okay, got a little more information. So last year we were awarded a lower no emission. Oh, sorry.
Are you answering his question? Or did you? We're good. Okay, so let me go to Councilmember Thomas.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to kind of back up to you were giving us a cost per mile. And those are not inclusive of this infrastructure that we're talking about. That's literally just service delivery miles, block miles, as you refer to them. We're not really even talking dollars and cents. I just want to make sure that if this conversation is inclusive of the actual cost of implementing the strategy, or if you're just giving us or is that a built-in number that you're giving us or not?
It's not. So we actually cost the infrastructure, then that, and I'll show this on the screen for the Lono award. So that's a fixed cost. This is the operating cost. So this is what it costs us over time, really focusing, a big component here is the fuel, the energy source. And then that infrastructure is a separate and fixed piece. But it is, and we've got these details in the fleet transition plan. We do evaluate the life cycle cost of each technology, and that's inclusive of infrastructure and operations and maintenance costs over the life cycle of the vehicle.
So the idea, if I could, is, at least the strategy is, what she was talking about, Councilman Pastor, about land, is that we're going to need more land available for operations. The idea is for them to the buses to be able to go back to an operations center and not being pulled over somewhere on the grid and plugging in somewhere. You're going to have pretty massive areas of charging stations to take these buses back in and charge them all basically in various operations centers deployed around the valley. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, so again, we're really being cautious. We don't want to get too far in front of our skis, so to speak. We're really looking at the technology today. As Jessica mentioned, there's huge advancements that's occurring. One of the things that we haven't discussed, and quite frankly, because we don't know enough about it, what happens to the technology once it goes to solid state. Now, solid state is totally going to change things. Today, it's out there, it's cracking right now. They've got problems with it, but it's a total game changer. So very similar to what we did before, we're looking at bringing in a small group, utilizing on the routes that they can make the route and return back to the facility. As the technology grows, then obviously we can look at the other routes that require 200 miles or 250, and we'll grow and add to those routes as the technology advances. As far as recovering them, so what our plan is, we're at Tempe and or Mesa. So we already have the garage parking and we have the canopies. So they will actually come in and be charged in their parking space. So we're not adding anything other than the fact, could there be land needed? Certainly, if we went to hydrogen on a larger scale, producing hydrogen, you would need land. If we would exceed what SRP can feed off of the grid today, yes, it could require a substation. But as far as the buses, as long as our fleet size stays the same, we can fit it in the same footprint. Does that make sense?
So the way it's designed, and we have detailed schematics, but I didn't include them here. But for battery electric introduction now, the chargers actually go on the roof of the canopies in the places where we don't already have solar panels. The buses are charged someplace. Each bus has an assigned location where it's parked under that canopy, and then the chargers come down from the ceiling. One charger can support 3 buses over different times of the day. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio of chargers to buses. I don't want to get too down into the weeds, but I want to try and paint a visual picture of what this looks like if we do try and go down the path of fuel cell electric bus, and we want to produce it on site instead of having it trucked in, which is a different set of trade-offs, then that actually does require some space. And this was part of this evaluation we did in the transition plan.
And the other thing that's important, this early phases, we are not even looking at en-route charging or what they call opportunity charging en route. We will manage the bus by miles, and so we won't have to charge en route, and so the bus will safely come home. Now, granted, there's a lot to be said with the operator and the operator training. They can make a huge swing on the range. And so that's part of our application is that workforce development for the training of the operators. Sorry, Chair.
No, that's fine. Councilmember McLean.
Thank you. You may have this in a future slide because I'm trying not to read ahead. With the advantages of greenhouse gases and or other reductions of fuel emissions, do you have a proposed amount of air quality improvements? Because one of the reasons that we talk so much about public transit is the reduction in AQ reporting. So is that in here too, or are you going to tell us that?
So we've quantified it in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. We typically talk about per mile or metric ton. Chantal, I don't know if you've got anything to add about projections and translating the greenhouse gas emissions reduction to air quality, which is I'm sure all of you are well aware of this. This is a very hot topic in conversation at the national, at the state level, and the regional level as well here in Arizona.
Hi, so in this analysis, we focused on the environmental costs of the greenhouse gas emissions. So we did quantify the total GHGs for the different options, but we did not go into detail with air quality. And then just to add a couple notes to some of the previous questions, which by the way have all been very thoughtful, so thank you all. The cost per mile for the total cash cost is included on that table with really tiny text, so feel free to take a view at that, and that includes the capital and operating. And even bundled together, we see that the total cash cost per mile is lower for battery electric bus, and I do want to add that those costs are a bit inflated compared to what you all will likely be seeing since Valley Metro seems to be going the direction of a hybrid fleet of both battery electric and fuel cell electric, with the intention of avoiding those significant costs associated with major utility upgrades. So when we did this cost evaluation, it included those significant utility upgrades, but now we're moving in a direction of avoiding those. And then the other topic around how are these chargers going to operate in heat is a very good one. And so the team is evaluating enclosing all the chargers and critical electrical equipment in HVAC enclosed structures above that canopy to help ensure that they perform as specified.
Okay. All right, we have one more question.
Two questions. As far as one is around right sizing kind of the fleet, what you touched on, looking at passenger data, those metrics, and how we look at purchasing buses that better are equipped to handle those routes, maybe a smaller bus or a larger bus. So can you talk a little bit about that piece? I don't see it very much. I think you mentioned it in various different points, but it's not I think an obvious thing that is out there. And then my second point is also when we're investing into infrastructure, and you talk about the Greenfield plant and the Tempe plant and figuring out, I know it's a complex series of deliberations and conversations with utilities and figuring out land but also, I think we own the Greenfield plant, right? Valley Metro does, and Tempe owns the Tempe site. So when we're investing tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure, we want to make sure that it goes into facilities that are going to last, right? So and so that's. Can you talk a little bit about the strategy of figuring out that piece further on how we have those discussions on how do we equip with the infrastructure over the next several years these two sites that you mentioned?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Heredia. So I will address the facility conversation, and then I'll ask my colleague Carol Ketcherside to talk about our max load analysis, which is a separate analysis that supported the zero emissions fleet transition plan. So you're correct that the East Valley or Tempe bus operations and maintenance facility is owned by Tempe. Greenfield is owned by RPTA, was donated or sold for a nominal amount of money some years ago to RPTA from the city of Mesa. And This equipment and technology is funded by federal discretionary funds, some formula, and then regional funds. And so I think this is a conversation that we're going to have, that we need to have. We're beginning today about use of regional assets. I think we can address that by memorializing use of those regional assets, perhaps through intergovernmental agreements or other commitments, so that we can focus that infrastructure to the benefit of routes and vehicles that support communities across the valley and in the Tempe Mesa. We're talking about East Valley and City of Phoenix specifically. What I'm going to show you in just a moment is the breakdown of our FY23 Low-No Award, which we envision actually executing at the Tempe East Valley Bus Operations and Maintenance Facility, in part just because of that little bit lower cost to start up at Tempe, but the costs weren't that much bigger for Mesa. So each of these opportunities could go at either facility at this time. So this is a discussion we need to have. These are big investments. It's big dollars and it's long-term investments. These are not transient relationships or investments that we're talking about. The buses themselves are 12-year buses, and the technology will last at least that long. And then max load. Carol, do you want to talk about max load?
Sure, thank you. Chairs, members of the board, as Jessica mentioned earlier, we have in the past had a practice of kind of replacing like for like. Whenever a bus gets old, if it was 60 foot, we bought 60 foot. That's not really the way we want to go going forward. We have a lot more tools now with a lot more data where we can be more analytical about how we make these decisions. There are a number of things that go into whether you decide to put a small bus or a large bus, the first of which is what is the type of service. So for example, in Tempe, we have a lot of orbit buses running through neighborhoods. We don't want to run a 40-foot bus through a neighborhood. So that's one consideration. We also are looking now at more data about what are the loads that these buses are carrying. So obviously a 60-foot bus can carry more people than a 40-foot bus. Do we send out a 60-foot bus? Do we even own the 60-foot bus? Well, we need the data to look at what loads are those buses carrying, and how big of a bus is needed. We did an analysis a few months ago about the loads that our buses are carrying most currently. The analysis did not strongly support the purchase of additional 60-foot buses. We believe that there's an opportunity to maybe downsize some of the 60-foot buses as they reach the end of their life. Maybe take a look at not buying a 60-foot bus. There's still a little more analysis to go on that, because we need to take a stronger look at how do we think our ridership is growing. As we mentioned, we're looking 20 years out. These buses live a minimum of 12 years. So we don't want to make a decision today to buy a 40-foot bus, and then in 5 years, we need a 60-foot bus. Another consideration in terms of bus size is how frequent does the bus run, and how frequent might we want it to run. So, and that is, obviously it costs more money to run more frequent buses, but you can use smaller buses. You might be paying more money to run a more frequent bus, but you also are giving better service to the customers in that the bus comes by more frequently. So these are things that we have to, as a region, we have to balance out what are the desires, what are our goals, and what do we want to really achieve with this.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, I want to provide a quick snapshot of what is envisioned for the initial battery electric bus deployment. And I haven't said this yet, but because of cost and because of that kind of conservative approach that we're taking to easing into zero emissions buses, which I think is palatable for our member cities and our budget, we've chosen to pursue battery electric buses initially with this first award that leverages that $13.2 million in discretionary Low-No funding, our regional funds, as well as other federal funding. Let's take a look at what that program actually looks like in terms of time. So the award, we were notified last summer of this award. Right now, we are in planning and conceptual design. Now is really where the blueprint from the fleet transition plan really starts to meet the road. And that's both for the vehicles and the facilities. And then later this year, we would begin the procurement and manufacturing process. City of Phoenix actually has a contract with Gillig, that's a transit vehicle manufacturer, for zero emission buses. So we would piggyback on City of Phoenix's contract. And by the way, I probably haven't said this enough today. We're working very closely with our member city partners, including City of Phoenix, on this work. And then we are also beginning charging infrastructure and design later this year. We anticipate receiving delivery of 4 battery electric buses in 2027. We're going to buy 20 total with this award, but we want 4 first. What we're going to do with those 4, those will be our beta buses. We will test them. We will deploy them in different markets. We will test our charging infrastructure, and we will have that performing according to our specifications with our charging manufacturer and our bus manufacturer before we take delivery of those other 16 buses. So again, this is a more measured approach, and those other 16 buses would come at this time. I'm going to show you some variables here in a minute, in late calendar year 2028. So that's initial plan. All the while, we're working closely with our cities, with WSP and with City of Phoenix on a forthcoming application for the next phase of lower and no emissions, which is due in April. So we are humming along very quickly. Before we close, I want to pause actually and answer any questions on this project before I talk to you about national environment. Okay. So in addition to cost and our local pressures and priorities, we also need to consider what's happening in our industry. And we're at a unique moment in the transit industry. And I worked in transit for a long time, but I have never seen the state of US bus manufacturing. Darren's been in it a little longer than me. So over our careers, suffice to say, bus manufacturing looks different now. What has happened, we used to have a number of transit vehicle manufacturers, a lot more competition in the market. We have found ourselves, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Christian.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to wait till you were finished. I was just trying to get his attention. So
Okay.
He's prepared.
We have found ourselves with just 2 transit bus manufacturing companies, New Flyer Group and Gillig. And what's happened is part of this is zero emissions, but part of this is pandemic. When we had pandemic era, we in the industry in this moment, we canceled orders. Some of those plants idled due to workforce and lack of parts availability, supply chain delays. We require a lot of equipment and technology. These are not yellow school buses. So think microchips and sophisticated computing. Then we add to that a record level of funding for zero emissions buses that has come out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we've got this infusion of funding for zero emissions. And we have a supply chain that's still immature at this point relative to our supply chain for traditionally fueled buses like CNG and diesel. At the same time, the manufacturers are really bearing the cost of development. So all of the engineering, the design, the retooling of their plants to transition. You know, Gillig's been study making CNG and diesel buses for decades, and now suddenly they need to transition to making diesel or to making battery electric and maybe even fuel cell electric. They're bearing that cost. The way we do construction historically and the way we buy trains, we do advance and milestone payments, but the way we've always bought buses for decades is that we pay upon delivery and acceptance. And so the manufacturers have been bearing pretty significant costs to retool and scale their tech to support new demand. So we've seen a number of manufacturers exit the market. And as a result, the pace of funding awards is here, and the pace of bus manufacturing or buses actually rolling off the production line is much lower. This has been a topic of national dialogue for some time. Within the American Public Transportation Association, we have a bus manufacturing task force now. I've been participating in this conversation for a while. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to join APTA, other transit agency executives and manufacturing executives at the White House. to discuss strategies on the manufacturing side and on the agency side to try and increase that level of supply coming from the market. And I've been sharing this information with our team. So some of those strategies include payment strategies that look more like how we buy trains. And this is all permissible within current Federal Transit Administration guidelines. So that's milestone payments, also price indexing. Our peers in Philadelphia, for example, have developed in the last couple of years a pretty, I'm not going to say sophisticated, it's really pretty simple stuff, but a more accurate method for costing buses. Our next steps moving forward is to focus on our specification. We have long, and I think I'm guilty of that, Darren, I'm sure you too. We have long been pretty demanding customers when we purchase buses. We've got a lot of customizations that we want, and it costs those manufacturers to stock all of those windows and to stock all of those parts. As a result, it takes us longer to get parts. It leads to less reliable buses. So we need to move to closer standardization. Our next steps and the conversations that we'll be picking up on this spring and summer are how can we focus on making our technology interoperable, things like our computer-aided dispatch systems, our announcement systems, our fare collection technology, so that we're not all, over 2,100 agencies are members of APTA, and all 2,100 of us can't have our own very special detailed specifications, or these buses are going to continue to cost more and more, and we're going to get fewer and fewer off the production line. So this is a limiting factor for us. I share this to say that in addition to cost and real estate, local appetite, market availability is going to help drive our decision-making and pace. With that, that is the last of the information we have for you. We will share this electronically. We also do have a very detailed fleet transition plan, and I want to make that available to this board as well as our city staff. Happy to answer any questions, as is the team.
Great. Anybody else have questions? Council member.
Everybody else does. My turn? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Stipp, Chair Stipp. So can you walk me through just quickly again, that first 20 buses, how that, I want to make sure I have it in my mind. I know the first 4 you said by 2027.
I'm going to invite Darren to talk about the initial deployment and timing.
Yes, so we're kind of treating this a little bit like a train. So, the first 4 are really going to be pilots. We're targeting 2027. Ideally, I like to get it in the first quarter of the calendar year 27, if possible. That'll allow us to do really a lot of integrated testing with the facilities, the charging system, the extreme high temperatures are all important, as well as how are we training and how are the operators performing on the routes. Some of the early strategies as well is to utilize these buses to actually get out on the routes. Just because the route looks like it can carry the bus and the range is fine for the bus, but these buses also, to maximize the range, they really have to be able to be allowed to coast. It's called brake regeneration, just like our trains. Meaning if we, even though the route may look like it's the right distance, but if the operator has to run bumper to bumper, then the opportunities to regenerate won't be there. And then to someone's point, we end up towing it back, right? That's what we're trying to eliminate. And so,
I'm
yes.
sorry, can I interrupt? So the idea is to take delivery in 2027 or place the orders? So I'm not sure I understand the timeline.
No, so the order, we've been in discussions with Phoenix, and as Jessica said, that we want to piggyback off of an existing procurement, so we don't have to go through the procurement process. We would order the buses depending on the lead time. We want to time them so that we don't have brand new buses sitting here we can't charge. So we're timing that with the infrastructure. So we want to have the infrastructure we're targeting to have completed in calendar year, probably late 26. Then the 4 buses come in. So now not only are we testing the buses, but we're testing our infrastructure as well. And then a break between early calendar year 27 and late calendar year 28 for us to be able to communicate back to the manufacturer, in this case, if we piggyback off of the existing contract, would be Gillig, to make any kind of adjustments. So do we needed to have additional cooling for the batteries because of how we operate in Phoenix? What things work well, what doesn't, and allow us time to work with their engineering department to have it included in the remaining 16, as well as having a good, clear direction for the first 4, which would be called what we would call like a trained FMIs. So it's okay, we get the other 16 fixed, but what are we going to do with the other 4? We got a problem. Well, we need those fixed too. And so that's our strategy of bringing the vehicles in at the 2 different time points so that we can drive, we can test, we can see how the operators are performing. Are the routes adequate for that vehicle? Part of what we learned in an early deployment, and it's tempting, is as the battery electrics come in and just shoot them out there on all kinds of routes just because they fit. The problem with that is the operator doesn't become proficient with operating. And we saw as much as a 50% reduction in the range of that vehicle just because the operator wasn't proficient. Whereas where we had dedicated lines, the operators become very proficient and easily made those routes.
I want to note on this procurement timeline, which shows us in procurement and manufacturing starting in the 3rd quarter of this calendar year, this is where we begin testing and specification. So before we actually order the buses, we'll go through that specification process that I mentioned earlier. We'll receive test buses that we don't buy, that we don't own, from the manufacturer. We ask that they bring them here to Phoenix, but not to bring them until summer, because that's when we really want to see how they perform. So that's going to start in summer of this year.
Okay, if I could, because I know you could probably talk about this all day. So, but I want to, I mean, just, unintended consequences is the enemy of public service, honestly. I think we've all, somewhere along the way, if you serve the public long enough, you've realized that there's unintended consequences around a lot of the corners. So where the grant funding that's going to cover 80%, that's all in place for this first 20 buses? Yes.
Yes.
And the infrastructure is all in place for the first 20 buses, the funding for the infrastructure for the first 20 buses. Because I mean, and I don't want to make a political statement, but I guess I will. A lot of this is dependent on who's occupying the White House in 2025. Yeah. So when we all understand that. So I think that's kind of at least what we're all thinking is, we don't want to end up, holding an empty bag someday. So that's the concern, at least that I have, is that do we have the funding in place no matter what happens in 2025 to at least this part of the program is 80% of the funding is in hand?
We do. This is an FY23 award. So we have this funding in place. We would also, in the hopeful event we receive an award in the FY24 cycle, we would have that funding in place as well.
Okay, thank you.
Kirsten?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for the presentation and taking the deep dive here into the study session. I think the environmental social governance aspect of this is really important. So I was kind of taken aback noticing that the greenhouse gas impact is higher for our CNG buses, because that is what I see out on the road in the growing number of buses that we have in our fleet right now. I guess as we look to the acquisition and going into the battery, are we sunsetting most of the diesel as we're doing that, or are we looking at, I guess, how are I see the short-term growth. I think long-term, we still have some of these buses online. And final comment, what is the max out age? I know that we're looking at the average age of the fleet being around 6 years, 250,000 miles. When do we look at a bus and say, hey, it's at that 12-year point, or are we allowing it to go further even if it has 600,000 miles on it and it's in good repair?
So the end of life for transit vehicles like this is typically about 12 years, and it depends in part on mileage. And so Federal Transit Administration evaluates a mixture of mileage and age until we can retire it. We are required by FTA to continue those vehicles in service until the end of their useful life. It's just good stewardship, and it makes sense for us here locally as well. So to your question, council member, about are we sunsetting the diesel or the CNG? The answer is it depends on when we retire them. We're coming to you today with a request to approve award of funding for 20 CNG buses. But those CNG buses that we're seeking to buy now are replacing buses that need to retire by the time we get them, and we're not ready to receive zero emissions buses just yet. So we're going to continue to see a mixture of propulsion systems in our fleet for a while. It's a slow but steady. It can be a steady march towards zero emissions. It's just going to take us a while to get there. So that's why we have to be thoughtful and deliberative, and we got to have a blueprint to get us there. And remember, out years, blueprints written in pencil, because federal funding could change, performance might not meet our requirements, and then we've got to adapt.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're good on the study session. I'm not seeing any other questions, and I know time is coming of the essence. So thank you very much to everybody who presented during this. We'll give just a second for the transition as we get ready to call to order the joint board meeting for Valley Metro RPTA and Valley Metro Rail. Pat, can you do the roll, please? Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. City of Avondale, Councilmember Max White.
Here.
City of Buckeye, Vice Mayor Clay Goodman. City of Chandler, Vice Mayor Odie Harris.
Here.
City of El Mirage, Councilmember Monica Dorsey. Here. Town of Fountain Hills, Councilmember Peggy McMahon. Here. Town of Gilbert, Mayor Bridget Peterson.
Here.
City of Glendale, Councilmember Lauren Tomlichoff. Here. City of Goodyear, Councilmember Bill Stipp.
Present.
Maricopa County Chair Jack Sellers. City of Mesa, Vice Mayor Francisco Heredia. City of Peoria, Vice Mayor John Edwards.
Here.
City of Phoenix, Councilmember Laura Pastor. Here. Town of Queen Creek, Councilmember Jeff Brown.
Here.
City of Scottsdale, Vice Mayor Kathy Littlefield. City of Surprise, Councilmember Allie Klein. Here. City of Tempe, Vice Mayor Jennifer Adams.
Here.
City of Tullison, Vice Mayor Lupe Bandon. Town of Wickenburg, Mayor Rui Pereira. And Town of Youngtown, Mayor Michael LaVault.
Yes, Pat, I'm here.
Thank you, Chair. We're ready to proceed.
All right, thank you, Pat. We'll go ahead and begin the meeting with item 1, which is public comment.
Mr. Crowley is here today, sir.
Okay, Mr. Crowley, 3 minutes.
Adding and interjecting some things that I didn't see that you were doing when you did that study session is one of the places that you could be putting those charging stations is in each of your community's public works areas. And on last month, when you did the origin and destination survey, you've never reached out to the feds because any business within our community that's 50 or more has to put together a transportation plan saying what they would be able to do. And I believe you would be then shown how many would like to have a bus where they're supposed to. I also worry about those batteries fire. Just a thought, y'all, since it takes how much to put them out. I have here my little transportation plan from MAG 06, and it's got in here some of the different roadways that you were supposed to be doing. And last year, of course, Litchfield Road was the one that you were supposed to address. And how come that didn't get done? I don't know. But then when I looked at the document there and it showed where you have not been buying buses, et cetera, I looked at and see that started between 13 and 16, you didn't do anything. And between 15 and 19, all of the routes that you were supposed to be didn't get done. We're talking Bell Road. Oh, yeah, and Ray Road. Wouldn't it be nice that when they were supposed to expand that in 18, that it would have got all the way to the airport? But then I'm also looking at with the new legislation, how much money is going to be not going to rail that will now be accessible to the bus? And that the amount of money you guys are going to be able to be using and doing is what? Well, the rail got 40 million last year from PTF, not counting the matching federal funds. That money will now be for the bus. In fact, you'll go from the 37% divided between rail and bus to 40% totally yourself. I don't see where you're doing the plan. I don't see where you're showing what you're going to be doing. And when I look at what it says in here for 2024, 5, and 6, nothing. So how are you doing what you should be doing? I didn't see that in this session. And when I also looked at the where you didn't buy them, I look at all of the Litchfield connections and Litchfield Road itself and go, of course they didn't do it. They weren't buying a bus.
Any other cards, Pat?
No, sir.
Thank you. So item 2 is the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief, but it would be remiss if we did not discuss and mention the opening of the Northwest Extension Phase 2 on Saturday, January 27th. Thank you, Councilmember McMahon and Edwards, for joining us on that glorious day. We celebrated the opening with over 2,000 of our partners and neighbors. It was a wonderful, wonderful event, wonderful opportunity to showcase this. It's a project of many firsts for us. This is our first elevated station, the terminal station at Metro Center. It's our first rail-only bridge over the interstate, in this case, Interstate 17. It spans 250 feet across the highway. I believe it is 62 feet in the air at the Metro Center station. It showcases art from a number of different local and national artists. And, you know, I find the art on the Valley Metro system to be tremendous, but I think they really outdid themselves. I congratulate our team on that. We've got a number of local artists, and the art really, I think, tells nice stories of the history and the character, not just of the region, but of the individual community at each of the 3 new stations. There's also a lot of lighting in the artwork. So it's a different kind of place during day at night. This project was funded, of course, with the local funding from Proposition 400 for the capital. And it was also the first project funded by the Federal Transit Administration under President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. So a significant infusion of federal funding into Arizona and into Phoenix in particular, matched by Prop 400 and Phoenix's T2050 funding. The project was delivered with our design partner, Jacobs Engineering, and our construction manager at risk. That was Kiewit McCarthy joint venture, and over 100 different subcontractors that contributed to this work. It's now in revenue operations for not quite a month now. I congratulate our operations team led by Mike Powell, our safety and security team led by Adrian Ruiz, all of the many teams who worked to make this project come to fruition. Hilary Foos on community engagement, marketing, and communications, who did a wonderful job of keeping the community informed and engaged and creating opportunity for them to share their feedback on the design process, but also the process that is sometimes messy and long as we construct these programs. And what a wonderful celebration that was. Congratulations, team. And then finally, we mentioned Kiara Hamilton. Just looking ahead at our next meeting cycle, we'll be back in this room on March 21st. We already began the March cycle with RTAG earlier this week, TMC, RMC March 6th, and Audit Finance Subcommittee March 7th, and again with an April cycle. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chair.
Awesome, thank you. Item 4 is the update from the Audit and Finance Subcommittee, and that will be given by Councilmember White.
Thank you so much, Chair Stipp. The Audit and Finance Committee met on Thursday, February 8th. We had a review from our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Kessler, and we got an update on the Public Transportation Fund revenues. We also had FY24 second quarter budget review. Mr. Olson gave us a status update for both RPTA and VMR budgets. They're both within plan at this point. We also reviewed FY25 service levels to make sure we understand the budget assumptions coming up for FY25. During our meeting, we had the opportunity and took action on the fiscal FY23 RPTA and Valley Metro comprehensive financial report and single audit reporting packages. I'm sure you'll have more information. And then we had an internal audit update from Sabrina. Other than that, I believe that concludes my report.
Great. Any questions for the Audit Finance Subcommittee? Seeing none, item 4 is the approval of the minutes from the last board meeting. Those were included in the packet. There's not any questions or comments. I'd like to entertain a motion for approval.
I move item number 4.
I second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5 is the fiscal year 23 Regional Public Transportation Authority and Valley Metro Rail Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, the ACFR, and the Single Audit Reporting Package. This item is being presented for information only. Is there a presentation?
There's not a presentation, Mr. Chair. Our CFO, Ken Kessler, is available to answer any questions about the ACFR, which is included in your packet.
Does anybody have any questions on that? Ken, I did have one. I apologize that I didn't get to reading this until yesterday. There was a comment made about a significant risk being identified related to the authority's implementation of the GASB Statement 96. Can you talk to that at all?
As far as Statement 96, the significant risk is, it's just a significant risk because it's a new GASB requirement.
Okay, and they identified that as a significant risk. I'm kind of surprised to see that in the first report then.
Yeah, it's just noted as a risk. It's not like it was like any kind of like material weakness in our controls or anything like that.
Okay, so can you speak to that to the board, or now that I've identified, or do you want me to go into more detail? Because I'm sure everyone's going, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, you probably need to go into a little more detail because I'm not as versed in the details of that.
Okay, so during how it was specifically stated was during the audit, we identified a significant risk related to the authority's implementation of Government Accounting Standards Board Statement, which is GASB, Statement number 96, subscription-based information technology arrangements, and the risks associated with a first-year implementation that has not previously been communicated to you. So I'm assuming that has something to do with our IT
Yes.
subscriptions that we have. So there's got to be something. Can we get some follow-up?
Yeah, sure. And just to hit on that quickly is basically the GASB has changed the way we report on IT. Basically, it's like maintenance agreements, subscriptions for licenses and things like that. We basically have to report them as if they're leases. Previously, they were just reported as annual expenditures.
Okay. So I think just a little follow-up would probably be.
Certainly, I'll get additional information from our controller to address that.
You want to ask a question?
No, I just want to clarify. So what it sounds like is they changed the reporting, and what we did with the subscriptions, we put it in expenditures, and now we're placing it as license or placing it as.
No, it was just noted as a significant risk because of the change in the requirement. We did report it as leases per the new GASB requirements.
And so when we do that, then are we still at risk?
I think it's really just a presentation or reporting, how you report it. That's the risk, is how it's reported. It's not like a risk in terms of like an internal control, in terms of maybe spending money we shouldn't be or spending it inappropriately. It's just how it's presented and reported in the ACFR.
Just how it's being reported. Okay.
We'd be happy to provide.
Just a
with
follow-up.
response, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I think that's all we need, just to, I think anytime we see that in an ACFR, we probably ought to have some management comment to why this is in place. So sorry for being a management geek, everybody. Just
Not a problem.
That's my thing. So item 6 is the travel and expenditures and solicitations report that is also provided for our information. Just for everyone's information, beginning on March 1st, the monthly solicitation report will be emailed directly to us. That seems to always be about 30 days behind. So us getting that report for this meeting is kind of, I don't want to say pointless because no information is pointless, but it's never up to date. So we're going to start getting that out to the board members. So that'll just look for another email from Pat as we progress through. So item 7 is report on current events and suggested future agenda items. Does anybody have anything for the joint agenda? Councilmember White.
Thank you so much. Thinking about environmental, social governance, and also our drive for low, no emissions. I was just thinking about what can we do as a board to increase our ridership and also be more considerate of the environment and kind of experience what we are living. And I thought it might be helpful for those who possibly are interested for us to have a Valley Metro Rail Pass so that we can cut down on our individual rides. And when we're in the service area, as board members, we can hop on and enjoy the ride.
And that is valid on bus too, fixed route rail and bus. So if you would like to avail yourself of an opportunity to obtain a Valley Metro Unlimited Pass for bus and rail, just reach out to Pat. We will get one to you ASAP. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you, Chair Stitt.
Awesome. Councilmember Klein.
Hi, I have a couple of items and the answer to this might be, I don't know. So I haven't heard any of this. I'm wondering if there is ridership data that would be available. We don't have a huge opportunity of numbers of buses that go from Surprise to Phoenix, but we do have a couple of fleet buses that do 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So I'm wondering if we have any ridership numbers specifically on those 2 routes. That I think that would be great for us to know. Then that's just for us in Surprise. And then are we already surveying our ADA or paratransit usage of rideshare? I already bent Tom's ear for a couple minutes before the meeting, so this won't be a surprise to him. But for those of us that live west of the 101 and don't have access to a whole lot of Valley Metro services, I'm looking for 2 things. One is, do we do a satisfaction survey on our rideshare and paratransit transportation? How satisfied are our residents that are using it? And if there isn't a survey, maybe we could get a survey. And also looking for an update, and this would probably be another workshop, would be an update on where we are on making accessibility to somewhere besides Phoenix for people to be certified for their ADA purposes. I know I brought it up during strategic planning, but I'm really looking at something that makes it easier for folks west of the 101, all of our cities, to access those services without having to make, as I spoke, a 6-mile transfer from El Mirage to Phoenix. To do that is a 6-hour commute for one person to be certified. And in layman's terms, I think that's crazy. So I would like to see some way for those of us on the west side to help our residents get certified for ADA faster, easier, quicker, and see if what you're already working on, as Tom mentioned to me, but what else could be done so that we could, that helps improve ridership from our side. But I have a huge population that I'm really trying to get to use the services. And I think being able to get them certified on this, on west of the 101 would be helpful. So if there's some way to have something about that.
Agreed. I will answer your questions one by one. We release a monthly ridership report, and ridership is available at the route level. That's an email that comes today to the board from Aaron Xavier with an X. So look for that. You know, we also have, the team developed these when I first arrived, and it's super helpful at getting to know the system in our communities. We have a city level summary of service and ridership. I know we updated those in 2022. I'm not sure if we have since, but I would be happy to have those shared with the board because I think it's really helpful to see a snapshot of what's happening with Valley Metro in your community. And then to the question on ADA market research, I don't actually know if we have a system-wide customer survey. I don't know if we have an ADA customer survey. I'd like to inquire with Tom Young and get back with you on that. On the ADA eligibility, I hear you and I agree. So this is something that's on Tom's plate. And just in the last couple of months, we have welcomed a new director of paratransit operations, Justin Sheldon, to our team to backfill Tom's prior role because he was promoted to deputy chief of bus and paratransit operations. And so this is something that they're wrestling with. And what we're going to have to do is come up with an interim solution to ADA eligibility for West Valley before we actually have a West Valley bus operations and maintenance facility, which that's the ticket and the solution, but we're not there yet. So we need something now.
Perfect.
Thank you, council member.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this being requested as a future agenda item for just, because I'm just curious why we couldn't just have a mobile unit that we send out to in the West Valley or places where people are not able to get to Phoenix to qualify, that they can just go to the customer.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question. We could have a mobile, if we had the resources, we could have a mobile unit, and we'll likely need something like that to distribute fares, including reduced fares. What I would need to go back and confer with the team on is whether we can conduct the eligibility process via a mobile unit, like a bus, maybe. We've got right now at our access center near 44th Street Station, we've got mock-ups of city curbs and curbless streets and sidewalks, and a mock-up of a physical bus in there. So that's something that we can explore. Would you like us to report back on an agenda item or in writing?
Can we just get a written report on that?
We have a discussion.
You want a discussion?
Or bring it back on an agenda item, yeah.
All right, there you go.
We'd be happy to. Thank you, council member.
Okay. Seeing no others, the next meeting is scheduled for March 21st at 11:15. So that concludes the joint meeting. We'll go right into the Valley Metro RPTA meeting that starts with a consent agenda, consent items 1A through 1E. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move
I
1A
move,
to 1E.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Any discussion or anybody want anything pulled from the consent? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item 2 on the regular agenda is the authorization to execute a cooperative purchase agreement, purchase order with Gillig LLC for compressed natural gas buses. Turn this back over to our CEO.
Okay, so the decision item before the board this afternoon is a request to spend for the purchase of 20 40-foot compressed natural gas vehicles in an amount not to exceed $34,720. That does include a 7.5% contingency. We are proposing to purchase these vehicles by piggybacking off a Washington state contract. This is a contract that's widely used in the industry. City of Phoenix often purchases vehicles off this contract. This is to replace existing vehicles that have reached the end of their useful life. This does not relate directly to the zero emissions transition. This is part of that fleet replacement strategy. And I should mention any of the decisions associated with zero emissions, like vehicle purchases, design or construction contract awards, would be going back to this board. So this is the first of many discussions and a request to approve that we'll have related to fleet and supporting technology and infrastructure. May I answer any questions about this item?
Seeing no questions. So may I have a motion to authorize the CEO to execute a contract with Gillig for the purchase of 20 CNG buses for a 12-month period with the option to extend one additional 12-month period for an additional 20 CNG buses for a total of 40 and 2 years in an amount not to exceed $34,720,000, which includes a 7.5% contingency of $2,420,000. Do I have that motion?
I move.
Do I have a second?
Edwards.
Did you get the first? Okay. may-
Second.
Who'd you get the first from? Okay, then second from Councilmember Edwards. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 3 is a report on current events and suggested future items. Does anybody on the board have anything for this particular board? Seeing none, the next meeting for just the RPTA will again be on March 21st, 2024 at 11:15. There's no other business. This meeting is adjourned.